we're gonna get to it, but I just want to say I loved your bio on your site, and I will read it for the listeners. Brian Drake lives and writes in California, but would like to write and live somewhere else. That's the best bio ever for an
Uh,
author. Could you
I do.
expand on that,
What
Brian?
what site is that on?
I forgot. I think Brian Drake books, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
okay, okay. See, there's been so many over the years. I mean, this has been I've been scribbling for as long as I can remember. No, that particular bio is, California kind of sucks. I mean, it's and the only thing it has going for it is that it doesn't suck as bad as everywhere else I've been. Um, I mean, the weather's great, but
That's
well,
true.
except right now we're like 42 degrees and under the threat of rain, so I'm not looking forward to the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But just I mean, politically, it's wonky. The infrastructure is awful. The roads are terrible, and we're paying so much in taxes, and we're really not getting a lot out of it. The
That, that,
people are.
that sounds like Belgium, actually.
Oh, really? Okay,
Except
so we're
for
not.
the weather. Our weather sucks.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I was hoping you were going to tell me how much better it is. I'll be on a plane to Belgium. No, there's, it would be nice to go somewhere else, but every time I do go somewhere else, it's like, okay, this isn't any better, and you know, but
Yeah, I mean, I've many of my friends live in California. I've got some friends like just talked before we start recording about it. That I've one of my best friends lives in the area, and I mean, like San Francisco. Like when I first came there, I think it's well over 10 years ago. Really love the city, beautiful city. Has a very, in many ways, European feel to it, or something
right.
close to it. So my girlfriend and I, we loved it, and I've seen it slowly devolve into what it is today. And I remember a few years ago when I talked to people like, okay, guys, this is going the direction of stuff like Detroit and so on. And there's
Hmm.
like this tipping point that you get when it gets this bad that there's no recovery before an incredibly downhill slope that
Hmm.
you can't stop that snowball anymore. And I remember being told like, no, 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 you're exaggerating, and look at all these other systems. I'm like, okay, well, it's 2023 now. We all know what's going on. I know you guys have
Hmm.
a new DA over there. Apparently, you said she's going to take care of things. We'll see. And I found out very sad because there's a lot of things I really like about California. There's a lot of stuff like policy wise that I'm like, you guys are nuts. But
Hmm.
and again, I live in Belgium. We
Right.
have similar levels of insanity. Like I said,
Hmm.
without the good weather. But no, it's sad. I mean, I really love.
Hmm.
We typically, my girlfriend and I go to the states every year, and we spend 2 weeks, driving around California. I love the Big Sur area. Just
Right.
feels it's awesome. Um, but yeah, I can imagine. But I'm sorry to hear that you haven't found anything you like better.
No, I thought I was going to like Texas better, but the weather's awful. People are okay there. Um, but yeah, I mean, Nevada. I mean, gun to my head, Nevada is probably somewhere I would go. But I hear from people I know that live there that they're kind of on their own downward slope. So it's like I just don't think there's anywhere to go, and we're just gonna have to grin and bear it, I guess, because it's not going to get better.
I'm afraid for a while that it's a while longer. We're gonna be stuck with a lot of issues,
Mm-hmm.
and but
Yeah,
yeah,
you
let
can't
go ahead.
you can't vote yourself out of these problems. They're
No,
they're just kind of there now.
I made the exact same point to a friend of mine who lives in California. I said, look, we were talking about, I forget what it was, something that whatever policy that the governor or somebody else that just passed, and and I said, look, you guys must want this because you keep voting the same people into power. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're that polarized and tribal that you're like, okay, I really disagree with a bunch of policies that are done by the people we voted in, but I can't stand the thought of the guys from the opposing party getting voted in. So I'm still going to vote for the guys who are messing up everything that I like.
Mm-hmm.
I like, then I mean, he disagrees that, it's not that we want it, but I get your point. I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't want it, but you're willing to live with it.
Right.
Okay, well,
And
that's a choice. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying either party is good or bad. I'm just saying, like, if you disagree with the policies and the results of the policies, but you don't vote anybody else in power, I mean, via con
Mhm.
Dios, I mean, that's just,
Right.
good luck with that.
Yeah, you get what you deserve. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to the books. So,
Okay.
because otherwise people are gonna be like, "What is he talking about?" One of my patrons had, I think, a really good question, and that's for the people the listeners who have not been keeping up with all your work. Wiebe said that you created several characters: Steve Dane, Scott Stiletto, you've got Sam Raven, and so on. Um, how do they come into existence, and how are they created? And before we get to that, I'd like you, if you could very quickly just talk a little bit about the different series that you write, kind of sketch it out for people in broad strokes.
Okay. Okay.
I
That's a
know it's a
tough one.
lot.
Well, the best way to describe it is they are all series about heroic characters doing heroic things. It's they all have a lot in common. It's always, good guy, bad guy series of confrontations and some sort of conclusion where the good guys come out the victors. The Steve Dane books are a little bit different because they lean a little more toward comedic stuff. They're amongst the adventure, there's some good one-liners and a few jokes, and I can't call it comedy per se because it's not a Ben Stiller movie. It's just that there are funny moments in those stories to kind of take the edge off the violence, I guess is the best way to describe it. Um, the Stiletto books, that's straight up secret agent adventure stuff. And Sam Raven is more of the same, but he's more of a freelancer that finds trouble in his travels. And a lot of times it's espionage related, sometimes it isn't. And I like the Raven books because it does offer a chance to do a variety of different action scenarios where it's not always a spy thing. And so far, readers like it too. And I guess that's the best way to describe the three series.
Okay, excellent. And we were talking before recording, and I said I just finished Terminal Memories, so the first Sam Raven book.
No,
Really enjoyed it.
well, thank you.
What I liked a lot is just that it's fast paced. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's relatively short chapters. I think I'm on solid ground saying that.
Yeah,
I mean, not too short, but just like it, just the pace is pretty quick.
right.
Obviously,
And that's
there. Go ahead.
that's calculated.
I know.
Uh,
I figured.
yeah. My idea with chapters is to keep them short, maybe one scene or a
Yeah,
couple of scenes, and then to end them at some point of dramatic tension.
yeah,
So they're like mini cliffhangers,
yeah.
So right when something's about to happen, it stops, and then you got to turn the page to find out what happens next, and that's just to keep you reading.
And in your defense, you're fair with the cliffhangers. You don't keep us hanging in the next chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Which when author do that, I'm like, oh, come on, don't make me read a chapter before you answer the question,
Right,
what's behind the door, or is the
right.
axe gonna fall, or no, don't do that. So you're very fair. I appreciate
Okay.
that tremendously
Well,
because
right on. Thank you.
no, I looked up the books that you have on Amazon, and they have categories for different books. And I'm on Amazon myself with some of my stuff, so I know
Hmm.
how it goes. But here are some of the categories that you're in: suspense
Okay.
thriller, conspiracy thriller, travel adventure, military thriller, espionage, bolt thriller, and there was a bunch more. I'm like, okay, so that's what Amazon says. How would you define your genre if you could, or can you?
Hmm.
You can create your own genre, I
Yeah,
think.
no, well, no, it's. I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, because you got to put a label on these things, and you got to call them something because they need to know where to put it. It's very easy to say that I'm in action adventure or adventure thriller. Um, I tend to look at things a little more generically and just say I write suspense, because the point of saying that is without suspense, the reader's not interested. And if you don't keep the reader interested, then they're going to not, they might read half of a book, they're going to put it down, they're not going to buy the next one, and I'm back at the car wash. So it's you have to write an entertaining story, and you have to keep the reader wondering what happens next, and that's the basis for every good story.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'd like to say I write suspense, but if I have to get technical, I do adventure thriller or action adventure or any number of the categories you just mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. And speaking of categories, I mean, because it was there and I mentioned it, the pulp thriller category.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, Raymond Chandler came out of the pulp genre. He is
Sure.
now considered one of the, maybe not the greatest writers ever, but a tremendously influential author, and I loved reading his books.
Yeah, he's
So
up there.
my love for urban fantasy came out of the pulp tradition when I was in
Mm-hmm.
my early teens with Jason Dark books, John Sinclair, Professor Zamora, and so on, which in Europe were really big. I don't know how in the US. And I think they're still running like 50 years or something, like every
Oh
week something
wow.
comes out. And that is considered pulp. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but they're fun stories to read. So you
Mm-hmm.
might want to label it. And just this morning, I was talking to one of my personal training clients, and a while ago, I think it was Amazon that they released some data, which they rarely do, about book reading. And it was about the Kindle version of The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt,
Okay.
which is then, literature with the
Mm-hmm.
capital L and so
Right.
on. And it was something along the lines of, um, I think like 2/3 of all readers stopped reading after about 30% into the book and never opened it again.
Really?
And then I'm like, okay, so you're quote unquote a bestseller, you're quote unquote an author with a capital A, you're writing
Mm-hmm.
literature, but nobody reads your stuff. The people who buy it, the majority doesn't read it or quits. What should we take away from that? And then I'm like, I was very, very, excited to keep on reading with your book because there was stuff happening the whole time. It was interesting and so on, as opposed to like, what the hell am I reading here? And this doesn't make any sense, or
Like I said, you've got to keep the reader engaged and interested. And if not, you can have all the hype in the world. Someone can say this book is wonderful, but if it doesn't keep the majority interested, you're only going to get a small amount of readers who like what you're serving.
yeah,
And you can't make a living on that.
I
Having
agree.
not read the book you mentioned, I can't really comment on it.
Oh,
But I
I
on
haven't read it
capital L.
either.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I just remember reading about that in on one of the sites that I follow when it
I see.
about the
I just
publishing world.
know, capital L literature from my own experience tends to, unless it's written really well, tends to lack uh, anything of interest.
Yeah, what's it called again? I'm gonna quickly look it up. Umberto Eco's book that I read, of the blah 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 of Foucault. What is it again? I don't remember. I read it in Dutch. Foucault's Pendulum is Umberto Eco's book that I read years ago, and I was like, I finished it and I battled through it, and I was like, I must be the dumbest reader ever because this doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm like,
Okay.
if this is literature, and I've been assured by many people that it is, and I'm like, okay, it's not for me then. I am not smart enough to understand how important this book is, I guess. I read The Name of the Rose because so many people were raving about it. I
Mhm,
like that a little bit better, but still it was, I mean, it's not for me.
mhm.
And what I found, I mean, I just finished reading your first book, and I said like, okay, so how does it make me feel? It made me feel like the action movies that I grew up with and that I liked.
Mm,
Like the 80s and 90s action movies is what it was exciting. There was stuff going on. There was some humor, but there wasn't like an important message that needed to be passed on, and it was just like have a good time watching
right.
this movie, have a good time reading this book. You've enjoyed this. You put it down and like, okay, this was fun. Let's read the next one, or
Mhm.
watch the next movie in the series, which is what I think any author would want.
Sure,
And
that's kind of the plan, you know.
I guess
Keep it
so.
coming back for
So,
more.
could you talk a little bit about how do you go about creating characters? Like, let's say Sam Raven. How did you get to create him?
The tricky thing with Raven, because by that point I've done there was Dane and Stiletto. There was another character called Wolf. So by the time I got to Raven, the trick was not to make him the same as everybody else. And for that, what I actually wound up doing is making him a combination of everybody else. But what you want in a character is something sympathetic that people can identify with. Um, you need, if he's going to be a hero, he needs to demonstrate heroic things early on, so we know what kind of personality he has. And then he needs a behavior pattern so that whenever he's faced with a series of choices, we know what he's going to do. And if he does something outside of that, you get an idea that there's probably going to be some consequences. So that's where Raven's his two rules came from. You probably remember them better than I do at this point since you just read the book. But no, what is it? No gunfights in public and no roots. He doesn't want to be
Yeah,
in one
he doesn't
spot
want
for
to be
too
tied
long.
down.
Yeah. And let's see. He's got the locket around his neck that reminds him of why he does things. And
He's extremely
I only write the character. I don't know the answer to the whole question. But you want some traits. I
yeah.
keep his physical description vague
Yeah.
because I want the reader to fill in their own idea. But then when it comes to everything else, he does have a behavior pattern that he follows, and you just stick with that and
Yeah.
hope people like it.
And would you say that, I mean, George Martin, I think, explained it like there's two categories of authors, gardeners and architects.
Mm-hmm.
Architect is the one who plans everything out, and he's got the outline, and he's got all the sheets with explanations about each character, motivations, traits, tags, all those kind of things. And he just executes that plan. Whereas the gardener starts with an idea, he waters the plants, he shapes them a little bit, and you see how it grows naturally. And I think, I mean, I know Brandon Sanderson does both. He plans, but some of his books he writes simply just as a gardener, and because he wants to enjoy it and like see how it goes. Where
Mm-hmm.
would you fall on that scale?
Definitely the architect.
Okay.
I see. Back when I started, I was very inspired by Mickey Spillane and Max Allan Collins, and especially how they would write these really surprise shocker endings,
Yeah.
where like if it's a murder mystery or something, the final reveal was like wow, or there'd be some sort of terrific action moment or something that just really blows you away. And when I was writing just as a gardener and making things up as I went along, I wasn't getting endings like that. Things were just kind of happening. And it took a while for me to discover this, but there was a James Bond coffee table book. It was the 50th anniversary thing, or big book, lots of pictures, and a lot of detail about how the producers and the screenwriters would get together before each movie and talk about what they wanted to do. So they would discuss locations, they would discuss ideas for action scenes. They didn't even have a story yet, but they're like, well, yeah, let's go to France, let's go to here, we can get a tax break if we go here. And the whole planning process was quite fascinating. And then they wrote the story, and then they would look around to world events or things in the news and construct their idea that way. And that's when I decided if I want shocker endings, then I have to do some planning.
Yeah.
So from that point forward, my outlines go about 15 to 20 pages. I do leave room to go off of that, go off the rails a little bit, and explore some other ideas that come up as I'm going along, and then I have the outline to get back on track and keep going. There was one Raven book, actually, the third one, Lady Death, it's called, which if you like the first one, you'll really like that one. Uh, it, the outline as I started just revealed itself to not make much sense in terms of being true to the characters, where it was the plot telling the characters what to do, and they were doing stupid things. It's like, Sam Raven would not make this decision, but here he is. He has to do it to serve the story. So for that one, I threw the outline out, and I only used it for the basic plot points to know where I had to go to get to the end, and then I kept the ending. So that's an extreme case, but that's usually 100% outline, and then in that case, I had to throw it out and make it up as I went along because the outline wasn't right.
Yeah. And when you make your outline, I mean, like 15 pages outline is a well-defined outline already. How do you get from A to B? Do you start with a basic ID, or do you just start puzzling until something clicks and then you're like, okay, I've got it. This is how it's going to be.
Usually the way it works is I will come up with a main premise. For example, something I'm working on right now. It's for a later Raven book, but it's in England back in the 50s and 60s. You had the Cambridge spies. Are you familiar with them?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so you had from World War II and then well into the Cold War, there were 3 British agents that were sold out, I should say, to the Soviet Union. And they were one by one discovered. Kim Philby defected to Russia. The others either wound up in prison or dead. I'm not 100% sure. But then there was a 4th mole in MI6 working for the Russians that wasn't discovered for 20 or 30 years. So in the United States, we've had our own traitors in the FBI and CIA. And I thought, well, what if there was another one from that period that had yet to be found, and someone does find it, and then Sam Raven has to come to that person's rescue. So that's the main premise, that there is a deeply embedded traitor still serving his foreign masters, whoever they are. I don't know who they're going to be yet. I'm still working on it, but that's the main premise of that one story. All the action that revolves around it, that's a whole different argument. And sometimes the way to start things, you just play with different scenarios. I think with Terminal Memory, the one you read, I definitely wanted to start out with Raven's buddies getting attacked and then having him be involved in one of those attacks. And then it just went from there.
Yeah.
I don't.
Go ahead.
Well, I can't answer where all the ideas come from because they all just start to roll like dominoes after a while.
Yeah.
And one follows another, and pretty soon you got a book.
Yeah, and many authors hate that question, where you get your ideas from. So I focus more on process. I think that's the most interesting part for me.
It's a lot of brainstorming, a lot of notes, what ifs, and a lot of things don't work out. I might, if I'm brainstorming, I might write down 6 ideas on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, I've crossed them all out and I've got 6 more. I mean, it's not, and then from that second set of 6, I might use 2. So it's just a lot of brain work trying to figure things out.
Do you ever also keep stuff in like a separate folder or file that, okay, this doesn't work for now, but I really like this idea, so I'll just maybe recycle it later?
The file's sitting to my left right here, actually.
Okay. I've got a file that's called Graveyard that's just filled with things that I might someday write, but I'm like, it doesn't fit right now.
Yeah, the file on my left, that's very small, just a lot of single pages and mutterings, and then the bigger file is in the other room, and that I will probably. I like to go through it now and then just to remind myself what's in there, but I'll probably never use those things. They're there if I really ever get stuck. But some of that stuff goes back 20 years, and it's just there. I always planned to use it, and I never did, and maybe I never will. Who knows?
Yeah, and I can tell. I mean, when I looked at Terminal Memories, is you can see there's inspiration from news events and world events and so on, and the war in Afghanistan and those kind of things. So I'm guessing that whenever something happens in the world, which the last few years tends to happen quite often, that you're like, ooh, I can do something with that.
Yeah, there's always, if you want to write a book and you can't find one or two ideas out of the newspaper, you're not trying hard enough, or the newspaper, who reads newspapers anymore, but in the news and from world events, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, just looking at the last year almost with the war in Ukraine going on,
Mm-hmm.
and start kicking off, and then really, I mean, we're just going to get to the spring offensive that's going to start up pretty soon. So things will
Mm-hmm.
heat up, and it'll get really interesting.
Well, it's
Um,
funny. It's funny you mentioned Ukraine because Sam Raven #4, the when was it #4? Yeah, it's called The War Business. Deals with separatists setting off a false flag operation to make the Russians invade.
that would never happen in real life.
Well, it happened a good 6 months before the actual thing, and what's significant about it is the target was the Crimean Bridge, which
Yeah.
Russia is so very proud of. And of course, what happened after the actual real life invasion? Someone blew up a portion of the Crimean Bridge. I wasn't the only one who looked at that and thought someone wants to blow that up if they want to piss off the Russians. That's what they should do. So,
And speaking of, real world events, I really enjoyed that, in terminal memory. You've got, I'm not going to spoil anything for people who haven't read it yet, but the bad guy meets in Brussels in the hotel. Yes, he does. He meets
okay.
with somebody. Again, I'm not going to say, but the Brussels hotel it used to be the Hilton. I spent more than one evening and night in the bar of that hotel with fine whiskey and cigars. So
Oh,
it was fun reading. Like, all right,
okay.
very nice. So
I'm sorry I don't remember more details
that's
about
okay.
that book. I wrote that 2 years ago.
You've
So
written a
I
lot of books, Brian. I mean, you've really written
yeah.
a lot, and I'm going to ask about that later. But so
Okay.
for the people for the readers, sorry, for the people listening to this, is that I mean, just look at how much Brian has written in such a short amount of time. Because I saw when I looked at all the books online, I mean, publication date 2017, and then I looked
Mm-hmm.
at how many you have. It's like, okay, we'll talk about that in a second. But
Yeah.
keeping everything in your mind, because what people who read books forget is that they read the final book, but how many revisions have you done? How many ideas have you tossed aside, and so on, and
Mm-hmm.
cut scenes, added scenes, and in the head of the author, it's often like this big mess. And I cannot reread any of the books that I've written. I write nonfiction, a little bit of fiction, but mostly nonfiction. If once it's published, I just don't want to look at that thing anymore and pick it up.
Right.
I hate it. Are you the same?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I with with the outlines and the planning, I'm able to do basically one draft of the story and get it pretty much right on. There's always something I could tweak or fix,
Yeah.
but you're on a deadline and we don't have all day, so get it done and get it in.
Yeah.
You do the best you can and off it goes. Um, but it's when it comes back in book form, uh, I will flip through the paperback just to see how it turned out. I will look at the ebook, at least the sample of it, to see how it just to see how it looks, to see what people are getting. But overall, no, I don't pay any attention after the book comes out. I don't have a copy of all of my own books. I think I only have about four of them. And I should and just for the number, there's almost 30 of the darn things.
Yeah.
And I should have a bookshelf of just my stuff, just to be able to see what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. But the urgency isn't there. It's like the fun is in the writing,
Yeah.
and I really don't care about looking at it after.
I have this habit that, okay, let me preface that. I was very lucky to be taken under his wing by Lauren Christensen, who's an author in, self-defense and martial arts, a police officer, uh,
Hmm.
written tremendous, I think he's written about 50 books by now. Started doing fiction a while ago as well. And he taught me how to write nonfiction. And one of the things he said that, okay, you have to celebrate it a little bit. So what he did, and what I do as well. And now that my kids are almost out of the house, it's more difficult. But I finally get like a published copy, and from the publisher, or I buy one myself if I self-publish
Hmm.
on I indie publish on Amazon, and it arrives. Okay, I hit the publish button, and then I put the book on the table, for the rest of the day. And if one of my kids passes along, I think, like, look, you see that? That's a book I just wrote. That's my new book. Isn't that awesome? And they're like, yes, Dad. And that for one day, I just bask in the glory of having
Okay.
achieved what many people do not. A large part of people who start writing a book never finish it. Then the next day, I put it on the shelf. I'm like, moving on.
Right.
So
Yeah, I can't. For the last book I finished that I turned in a month ago, my wife said, "Let's go out to dinner," and I said, "That's fine." So we did. Normally, and at dinner we didn't talk about the book at all. Um, yeah, but normally it's done. I finish, it's gone, and then I'm on to the next one, and I don't have time to celebrate. I mean, I'm on a. We used to do book. We used to do a book every 120 days, so 4 months. Now we're on 90 days. So we you know just you gotta get back on the horse and keep going. You can celebrate later.
that's really fast. I mean, 90 days is really
it
wow.
it it is not ideal. Um, Ideally, I would love to do maybe 2 books a year instead of 4. There
Yeah,
are some guys I'm jealous of that get to do 1 book a year. That's a big, thick one. Yeah. But with the I don't want to say it's the economics of Amazon, but it's certainly what the economics that Amazon has created with the Kindle program and self publishing in general. Is that the more you write, the more you get noticed, and the more you get noticed, the more people buy, and it's not really so much about making a lot of money, but it is about establishing your brand
yeah.
and making it so that when people see your name, that they connect it to, oh, he wrote such and such, and that they keep buying it. Um, if you only put out a book once a year under that kind of system, then it's very easy to get lost.
Yeah, and the publishing's changed a lot in the last 10, 20 years. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when the ebooks, when Amazon started selling ebooks and the Kindle came out. And at
Right.
first there was this, I mean, I'm sure you remember that the publishing business
Mm-hmm.
was like very, very dismissive of indie publishing.
Right.
One publishing guy, CEO of a publishers, called it like, we're going to have like the regular transportation, and that's going to be the authors that we have, and that is going to be the cattle, and that's going to be the indie published authors. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, good luck with that.
there was another fellow that I know who referred to it as a tsunami of crap.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I violently disagree with that. I mean, not that he's 100% wrong. There is a lot of bad material, but you have mostly now authors that treat it like a business, and because they're
Yeah.
treating it like a business, they are putting out solid material. I go to the 20 books to 50K conference it's in Vegas in November every year. And late in the last couple of years, they've been doing a big book signing where people get to display their stuff. And there are some very talented people putting out some very incredible books.
Yeah.
And to paint it with that kind of a brush as cattle or as crap is not fair, because they are turning out work that is in some cases superior to what is coming out of traditional publishing. The bad stuff is from the people who they don't take it seriously. They just
Yeah.
write something and they put it on Amazon, and then they complain that they haven't sold 10 million copies.
And to be fair to indie publishers, is also, we have to say that traditional publishing has certainly on more than one occasion published books that were complete and utter crap by people
Oh
who had a
yeah,
big name but
oh
couldn't
yeah.
write for shit. So if they want to be highfalutin and sit on their high horse and preach down to the plebs, maybe look in the mirror first.
What happened was that it took their power away,
Yeah,
because for the longest time they were the gatekeepers that got to approve what people read or watched or listened to, and then better technology came along that allowed people to bypass them, and they didn't like that. It's been what 12 years now since the Kindle came out and self-publishing with it. Uh, there are some aspects of traditional publishing that has come to accept that self-publishers are here and they're not going anywhere. So they're a bit more accepting. They at least won't laugh you out of the room, but there are still others that maintain that prejudice, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, and the thing is also that, I mean, many indie published authors totally bypassed the traditional publishing system,
Hmm.
are making a good living of it,
Sure.
uh, and have no interest working with any big publisher. And I know some people in the business, they're like, we get these calls from these publishing houses and these agents trying to, sign us. And we're like, "Hey, what do you offer?" And they come with these horrible, horrible contracts,
Right.
these right grabs that are just incredible, but also that the money that they suggest to pay for that, or the advance for the next book is like, some of the authors say like, okay, I make this in 2 weeks with
Yeah.
my indie published stuff. So you've
What do
got
I need you
nothing.
for?
Yeah, I don't need you.
Yeah.
What do you bring to the table? Yeah,
Right.
but it's our imprimatur, and you have the prestige of us, and blah blah
Hmm.
blah, and we will do marketing. And then you ask like, okay, what's the marketing campaign going to be like in detail? Go. And then there's nothing.
Right.
And then I'm like,
Yeah. You'll get a publicist who will send out some press releases, and the marketing's on you. And that goes back to the 90s when marketing budgets were pretty much cut to zero, or at least reduced significantly, to where it's like one publicist dealing with 15 or 20 authors, and you're not getting really any good attention, and they just do the bare minimum.
yeah. And what I've heard nowadays is also that if you want to be as an indie author, be picked up by some of those guys. I mean, they look at it like, what's your platform? What is your
Right.
reach on social media? And I'm like, okay, isn't that your job? It's, I mean,
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, they want you to have a podcast. They want you to have a YouTube channel where you are generating interest from people that you can then sell a book to. And not everybody has that. For nonfiction, of course, it is important. You need to be speaking or have some sort of expertise in what you're writing about. Um, but for fiction, you can always grow the platform later. To have it up front, I mean, it builds value. It's not a bad thing. Um, I mean, I started writing a blog in 2010 because I thought, well, I'll just start attracting interest and build up some readers. And then self-publishing came along. I thought, well, I'll try this too for the same thing. And it kind of worked, where I built up a bit of an audience so that when my publisher took me on board, that we had people to sell to, and more people came around after that. Uh, but yeah, some of the demands they make, and the contracts, they can be pretty bad. If you have a good advocate on your side, uh, and not necessarily an agent, I mean an attorney, uh, you can change some of those contracts. And those attorneys aren't hard to find. It's just people don't think to go look for them because they don't know they exist.
yeah, I've had my share of traditional publishers as well with contracts. And when I started out, it was like, what the hell did I know? And I was just happy to be picked up by
Mm-hmm.
some of those places. And overall, my experience was positive. There was some negative, but overall, it was positive.
I
But
almost, I'm glad it was positive for you. I had to threaten to sue my first publisher.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
yeah, because they just blatantly said we're not going to follow the contract. Not in so many words, but they told me
Yeah.
that, yeah, things, they ran into cash flow problems. They couldn't keep their word, and instead of working with me to,
Oh, I'm losing you, Brian. I think the connection is a little bit bad. I'm going to see if it picks up again. It's not on my end, it's on your end. So we'll see if it comes back. But
hey,
yep,
you froze up,
yeah.
and it cut me off.
Yeah. It's a little bit wonky still. It's recovering. Yeah, no. If you could go back like 1 minute, you were
Well, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about the contracts.
Yes, yes. Well, I was talking about how I had to almost sue my first publisher.
Yeah,
They wrote a contract, and they said, we're going to do this, that, and the other, and there were 5 books involved, and they wanted to publish all 5 very quickly. They ran into cash flow problems, only did the first 3, and then said, we'll do the other 2 when those books turn a profit. And that began the argument where I said that's not in the contract. If you're having trouble, let's put an addendum in there. Let's protect us both. Because as of right now, you're in violation. And they decided to ignore me after that. So then I got my attorney involved and said, okay, you're either going to make this right or you're going to give the books back. My attorney said he would send them some increasingly nasty letters, and there would be up to 4 of them. And by the 4th, that would be the one announcing our intention to sue. And they ignored the first 2. They gave us an intention to reply to the 3rd one. And then once they realized how much shit they were in, they said, okay, there's no reason to take this to court. So I got everything back and I found a different publisher.
That's great. I'm happy for you because it's. I think the average reader doesn't know just how difficult the business side can be, and I'm very happy being indie published now. I have so far no plans to go back to a publisher. In my niche, there's not that many publishers that are out there still. Self-defense, martial arts, violence, and so on. In nonfiction, it's a limited audience.
The one big publisher that did those things is out of business now.
Yeah, I first signed with Paladin Press, but when Peter died, the owner, they just closed up and all the rights reverted. Wow. That was a few years ago. They just stopped operating.
Right, I didn't know it ended like that.
Yeah, I forget. I think he maybe a heart attack or something. I'm not sure anymore. It's been too long. But that was like suddenly, and there was, as far as I can tell, there must have been interest from other publishers to buy them up, buy the catalog. But I think in many ways it was the fairest to the authors. It's like, okay, your rights revert to you. So I indie published all my stuff, my instructional videos and my books to them. But it's a lot of authors, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, it's on you now. Now you have to all this stuff. And I was already self-publishing by that point. But I was very happy that from then on, I was like, there's no clauses anymore with rights of first refusal that I have to take into account. All that. And they were really cool about it. It's just that I'm not signing anything anymore that says that kind of clause, that has that kind of clauses in it. Because like, no, I write in different genres and I want to be free.
Right.
And if you don't like that, that's fine. I will indie publish. It's okay.
Right. Yeah, you are now more in charge of your writing career than you were ever allowed to before. And that's true for any indie writer and any formerly traditional writer that goes indie. It's like, you're in charge and you're in control, but you also have all the responsibility. So you've got there is a lot to juggle, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it is a much better position to be in than the other way around.
Yeah, and a while ago, this many years ago, I was in negotiations with a publisher, and he started, because we were going over the contract, he sent all boilerplate stuff, and he says, Wim, contract is like a marriage between 2 parties, and said, I'm like, that is excellent, so I get half, right? And he was like,
I bet he liked that one.
So we very quickly got rid of a bunch of clauses that I didn't want in there, and saying, I'm like, look, I disagree. It's not a marriage. It's a business relationship. If it's a marriage, we're equal partners, unless you have something you want to say how you feel about women. But in principle, we are then equal partners. That means revenue is 50-50. That's not going to happen. And again, for the readers out there, authors getting 50% on a book sale, good luck finding one. And that includes all the biggest names that you think you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. The highest royalty rate I'm aware of from a traditional publisher with an advance is like 15%. Stephen King might get a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Usually you're talking 5%, and 10 is unheard of. For the publisher I'm with, since it's all we don't do advances, it's a straight royalty arrangement. I get 40%, which is very significant.
That is great.
Yeah, but it's straight royalty, so there's no money up front, which is why it can be higher.
Yeah, and it's also percentage of what, not the gross price, but the net price.
Well, it is, yeah, it's net, and no one ever gets gross.
No, and again, this is what people sometimes like. Oh, yeah, but you must make a lot of money with your royalties. Like, no, 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 no. When a publisher sells a book, he sells it at a huge discount to Amazon, who then take their cut, and that's what you get your percentage of. So when
Hmm.
everybody has their cut, you get,
You
10
get what's
whatever
left.
percent of that. Then
Yeah.
you have to pay 50% taxes on that.
Hmm.
If you think that it's as very easy, I think you really have to study a little bit more about how the publishing business works. And
Well, see, but everybody hears of. I mean, what got me thinking that I could make a living writing? It was reading about Stephen King's $10 million deal for 4 books or whatever it was in 1989.
yeah,
I saw that and I thought, hey, this is great. I'm nowhere near that.
yeah, it's a rough business, and you know, I mean, let's get to it. I mean, writing a book in 3 months, I mean, that is, for me, that's incredible.
Mhm.
And how is your writing day like? So let's say, on average, how much time do you spend writing a day?
It could be as much as 2 hours if it's a good day. And then sometimes it goes longer than that. My goal is 2,000 words a day, which is about 8 double-space pages. Um, and let's see, yesterday I only did 1,000 because I also have my day job, so I've got to do everything. I've got to squeeze it all in. Uh, Ideally, I could write in the morning. By evening, I'm too tired. But yesterday I had some other errands to run and I didn't get to it, so I'm typing during my shift, and it was a little rough. So yesterday I only got 1,000 words done. I got to make it up today and tomorrow, and I'm not looking forward to that. But yeah, 2,000 words a day is ideal, and
No.
that was Ian Fleming's formula, and it's a good steady pace. It's not too much, and it's not too little. Uh, because what you want to avoid is trying to squeeze in 5,000 words a day and burn yourself out, and then you don't finish the book, and we don't want that. So a good steady pace is what you want, and the book gets done in 2 months, and then you got a month to mess around with it. I do an edit, just a very short pass through, and then it goes to 3 people that look for typos and look for issues in the manuscript. That there was one time in one of the Stiletto books where he had lost his cell phone in a hand-to-hand fight
Yeah.
on page 30, and then on page 60 he takes the phone out of his jacket, because what had happened was a long break in between writing those scenes, and I had forgotten he lost his phone. So one of my editors pointed that out, and I had to fix the fight scene so that his phone stayed in his pocket. So they find things like that,
Yeah.
and then it goes to the publisher.
So, but I'm guessing with all the books that you've written by now, I mean, you must end up with a pretty decent first draft.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's why the outline helps, and that's
Yeah.
why I use that so that everything's planned. I don't get stuck. It's not so much that I need more than one draft, although honestly, more than one draft would be nice if there was time. Um, but it's like, with the outline and the plan, you get it as good as you can the first time around, and there's really no need to go back through it again unless there's stuff I really don't like. I think on the last book, No Name on My Grave is what it's called. There were some sections that I redid. I took the time to redo them, and they were combat scenes. And on the first pass, they just weren't very exciting,
Yeah.
and I wanted to make them a little more suspenseful. So I went back through them and did them again. Second time was better than the first. I don't know if it was perfect, but I didn't have time for perfect, so I did my best, and off it went.
Yeah. And do you do a lot of research for, like locations and so on? Because like the hotel,
Mhm.
I was like, your character, your antagonist is a little bit dismissive of the interior. I don't like it, the way I remember it. It's been a while since I went there, but yeah, the interior was not all that great. So
Was that that was the lady assassin, right?
No,
No?
that's the Afghani dope smuggler
Okay, the
who,
dope guy.
yeah,
Okay. So,
and
wish I could
he,
remember. I only wrote the book. I can't remember anything about it.
yeah,
Um,
but
no, I
thirty
don't.
books later, I don't think I would remember everything either.
No, I know, I know. No, I started Terminal Memory at the beginning of the 2020 lockdowns, by the way.
Wow,
So I had a whole lot of time to devote to it, and that one, I think I wrote that book in a month. Um,
holy crap!
but just as far as research and studying those things, uh, I mostly it's all done on the computer. I don't travel. Um, And if, as far as that hotel goes, if I had a reaction to pictures I saw on Google or something, then that's how I learned about the interior and gave that particular character that reaction. Of course, I thought you were going to say it's actually a nice place, you know.
No, it's a great hotel, and the bar is excellent.
Oh, okay.
And again, it's been a few years since I went there, but back then, yeah, the interior was pretty dark.
I see. Okay,
So I
I can't
can,
remember how I described it, but
yeah, the bar is actually quite nice, very cozy. Back then, a great bartender team. So,
mhm.
like I said, I spent many nights there, drinking good whiskey and smoking cigars
Right,
and talking the night away. So, good memories
right
for me.
on. Well, yeah. So that would have been researched on using Yelp or Google or whatever. Location, same thing. Um, I've learned the hard way that what I think I know, just because I've been involved with it my whole life, is stuff I need to look up if I'm going to put it in a book because I've made mistakes. There was in a stiletto, I put him in an airplane that I described as having propellers. It was a DC-10 specifically, and the DC-10 is a jet plane, and I was thinking of the DC-3. But because my father's a pilot and I've been in and out of airplanes my entire life, I didn't think I needed to look up that detail. Um, there was another where I had a character restore an old muscle car, and I described it with the wrong engine. I think I said that it had a 454 V8, and somebody wrote to tell me no, that car had the 455. And then I'm like, oh, of course, it was the Corvette that had the 454. It's like, I know this stuff. I just didn't double check. And I should have double checked. So, yeah, research can be tricky, but for foreign locations and things like that, the internet is amazing and allows me to see places that I can't get to otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. And do you get like crap from gun fanatics about
Oh, the
the M4
gun people.
Commando is not used typically by operators, blah blah blah, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
gun people and military people are the worst. You know? And what's going on is I am now paying for all the years that I would get on authors' cases for making mistakes with guns because yeah, I used to be I am one of those guys too. So yeah, the gun people love to nitpick little details, um, and they put it in the Amazon reviews too if they don't contact me directly. Um, Although I think from now on, I just, because there's always the big debate between silencer and suppressor, and what is the
Yeah.
proper name? And everybody says, oh, it's a suppressor. It's not a silencer because the gun is never silenced. And it's like, well, when Maxim did the initial patents for his suppressor, he called it a silencer. So the patent says silencer. So from now on, I'm calling it a silencer, and everybody
I
else can screw up.
I actually noticed that you use suppressor and like, nice, because he
Yeah,
was good.
because everyone expects it now. And if you use silencer, you're going to get 10,000 angry emails. Um, and then there's the guys that want to criticize, the military guys that they want to criticize the tactics or the choices that the characters make. And they always back it up with that, I was an 82nd Navy PJ 00 Ranger and I'm the real deal and I know what it's like. What's funny is I never hear from the cooks or the supply sergeants or the rear echelon motherfuckers. It's always some special forces guy that needs to send me a note and correct me for something. And okay, I'm not writing this to be realistic. Get on the roller coaster or don't.
Well, that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask because I really enjoyed the action scenes and
Mhm.
every author who writes suspense thriller action, whatever we want to call it, has his own take on action scenes.
Right.
I typically enjoy those the most. Uh, how do you go about constructing them? Do you have like, okay, I want to end up in this place, like in terminal memory here, we need to at the end up in a certain room with three certain characters that will
Right.
end up being there.
Right.
Do you work towards the ending, or is it like, okay, I want to do this like in the cottage, I want to have like a big shootout in a cottage somewhere on the British Isles?
It was
Well,
a little bit of both.
okay,
Because what I remember from Terminal Memory is we have a big sequence in Ireland,
yeah,
and I don't remember what made me choose Ireland. I just seemed like I hadn't really done anything with Ireland in a story. I'm part Irish, so it's like, well, what the heck? Let's go to Ireland. Um, so I had to find spots for things to happen. So I found there was the school that the teacher was at that because they
yeah,
had to grab the teacher because she was the terrorist sister.
yeah.
I remember some of it. So I had to actually find a school to use. I think what I did use was based on a real location. And then I just followed the map and watched where the road went and found a particular spot where they could stage their car accident. And then I found a countryside and I thought, well, here's a great place to put some cottages and we can have a big fight here. And that's pretty much how it happened. I was just, looking at the map and looking for places to do things. As far as how the scenes play out, sometimes I get it right the first time, sometimes it's trial and error. My outlines will usually just have one line where, like, they fight and so wins. And then I have to construct all the details myself. And sometimes it works the first time, and then like with the last book, sometimes I'm not happy with it, and I redo the whole thing. And but you're going for maximum excitement, suspense, and hopefully some sort of satisfying conclusion, which in that case dealt with one of the major bad guys. So you want it to be good, and I just ran through it until it was right. Usually I will play that kind of scene out in my head first and try
Yeah.
different scenarios, and then I go and write it down.
Yeah. Are you more
So
visually oriented? Because that's typically how I write. I
I,
see it in
I
my head first.
guess it just seems to really help me watch it like a movie first, because
Yeah.
I grew up on Chuck Norris movies too, so yeah, I like to play it out like one of his movies and then go try and transcribe it. Is I guess the process.
It's like I said earlier. That was a feeling that I got. It's like, okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
like the movies that I love to see growing up and still do. Just recently, it was Commando was on TV with
Oh
Schwarzenegger,
yeah.
and I was like, uh, uh, my oldest client. I've been training him for over 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
and this is like a running joke with us. How does it feel to die, John? As he gets beat up by the bad guy. At the end, he throws this big pipe at him, like,
That's
let
right.
some steam, Bennett. So,
Yeah.
and I sent him like it was on TV here, and I just took my cell phone, took a few pictures. I sent him, said, look, it's on TV, and obviously it's outdated, but in many ways it's just good old fashioned action movie fun.
It's I
No
don't
message,
understand.
nothing.
Yeah, I don't understand why so many there's a certain niche of readers that want realism and they
Yeah,
want to feel like they are reading a classified report on what has happened in such a case that they're reading about. And they get real picky when you come up with something instead, like Commando, which is ridiculous. Um, I don't know. It's like physics didn't apply to anything in that movie, but it's one of the best shoot 'em ups ever.
yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. And 99% of the audience enjoys it. And then you've got these guys that say, well, that's not the real deal. And I don't understand why they get so nitpicky about it because it is meant for entertainment and there are worse things to do on a rainy Saturday. And just, like I said, get on the roller coaster or don't. But don't complain about it if you decide to stay off.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I liken it to a lot of people were surprised to the success of the movie Taken with Liam Neeson.
Right.
Because his daughter gets kidnapped and is going to be sold as a human slave or
Mm-hmm.
prostitute, whatever. And he's ex CIA, and he just goes to town in Paris, and then he gets her back. Like, and it was just like, yeah, that's what I would do.
Hmm.
No, you wouldn't, because A, you do not have a particular set of skills
Right.
that he has, and B, that's just not how it works in real life.
No,
But it makes
and
you
even
feel like, yeah.
yeah. Well, there was a video on YouTube where, and it's a bit of a rabbit trail and it's a bit ridiculous, but I thought it was interesting, where there was a doctor who analyzes Die Hard, and he points out at all of the spots, all of the action scenes, that if this were real, John McClane would have been dead within 10 seconds. And in fact, he would have been dead before the first gun battle in the building, because he took such a blow of some sort that it would have crushed his ribs or something like that. And it's worth a watch, just if you're curious. But yeah, the stuff we would love to say that I would do what they do in the movie. No, I know people that have those kinds of skills, and even they don't do it in real life, because they're bound by not only physics but by rules, and and in some cases the law, and things work a little bit differently in real
That's true. Uh,
life.
but speaking of reality, I mean, you don't write fantasy, so it is based in the world as we know it and experience it. So you're shooting for some level of realism, but knowing full well that you can never translate realism completely. And in many
Well, yeah,
cases, if you want to tell a good story, I mean, you cannot be 100% real. So do you have like a filter that you use when you're writing, like, okay, I want this to be realistic but not over the top? Like many fights, fight in real life very often is over very quickly. It's
hmm
not pretty. It looks horrible, and you've got anything from somebody just looks at you when you punch him really hard in the face, like, is that all you got? To you hit him very lightly, he falls knocked out, he crashes into the floor with his skull on the pavement, and he's dead. And
hmm
between all that, everything from between these two extremes is real too. So when you
right.
write in the action genre like you do, I mean, realism is very very tricky, because the same thing applies to firearms. You've got
hmm
some. I mean, my co-author told me that a story about a call they had with a bank robber. Guy came out blasting at the cops. They shot him back. The guy runs around the block, and in the autopsy, they find that he had a bullet right through his heart, and he still ran
hmm
across the block
right.
shooting. So for the audience who gets upset with you that it's not real enough, all those high speed low drag operators out there behind their keyboards, and I mean that with all due respect, because I know some of the guys
Right.
out there writing comments actually are badass, but I'm guessing not all of them are, and I'm being
I
careful.
I I think the real ones understand and don't bother me. I think the ones who claim to be are just talking out of their ass. But I could be wrong. Come and say hello sometime, and I'm the guy that said this, and it's like, oh, okay, fine. We can talk. But
But
no, I don't put a lot of credit
yeah.
to what they
So
claim to
do you
be.
have some sort of filter to your head, like, okay, this is kind of the level of realism that I'm shooting for, or maybe a subconscious thing?
Well, it must be subconscious, because I mean, I'm not going to have somebody with two pistols leaping over a car and then shooting accurately as he's diving into the ground, and then hit the ground and roll. And because when you hit the ground, you're going to get the wind knocked out of you. You don't just keep rolling and shooting and never run out of ammunition, by the way. uh, Although there are some writers I know that do stuff like that, and nobody appears to complain. um, my goal with anything real is, with the characters first, is to try to create some sort of character that could exist in reality, and then put them in situations where they have to deal with something extraordinary. um, and I guess that's really the only standard or only filter. And if I find myself doing an action scene that's going a little too crazy, I'll probably rein it in. I can't say that I've ever done that. I do think I could push it to the edge a little bit more,
Yeah.
because I do tend to hold back. Um, so yeah, I think that's the only filter. Is like, if I want strong characters first, and
Yeah.
then I want to have them do things. And if your characters are strong and they're kind of dictating, or at least communicating to you, and I know this sounds strange, of how they're going to handle a situation, and you let them do that, then everything seems to work out because the action follows the character. And when you have that, you have a strong character.
Yeah.
If that makes any
And
sense.
do you, I mean, you said that you like were very inspired by the Mickey Spillane books and so on.
Mhm.
Your prose, your writing style, was that something also that you worked on specifically to like work in a specific direction, or
No,
organically?
that's just something that happens over time.
Okay.
Um, because I don't like too many words.
Yeah.
I don't like writers who overwrite. Um, and I know why they do it, because they're contractually obligated to turn in a manuscript of 90 to 110,000 words, and so they get a little redundant to fill up the space. Inside secret. Um, but I like it tight and concise to the point, and that's how I end up writing. I do a lot of deletions of, if I have too many words, I will take out a bunch, and it's just how can I make it straight to the point and still be descriptive and not be overly so, and not be boring. And that's
Yeah.
really the only question is this scene boring, and how can I make it not boring? And if I'm, yeah, there are people that skim descriptions if you have too much of a description. So it's like, all right, keep that to, yeah, keep it to a minimum.
Yeah, I noticed that immediately about your writing style. That it's like you said, it's very concise, um, and I guess that's a personal preference. I mean, some people love like the half-page long sentences.
Right.
I'm not one of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
If you make me work for it to keep track of what you're writing and not lose me,
Right.
if you go out
Right.
of your way to show your vocabulary, I'm like,
Oh, for sure. If I got
it,
to have a dictionary next to me, I can't get into the book. Yeah.
and I know that certain authors really like that because they like
Mm-hmm.
the sound of the word, or they don't want to write the same words over and over. They like to use a bigger vocabulary, and I mean, I guess it's a choice. It's a stylistic choice.
Yeah, and sometimes some writers think they have to use the big words
Yeah,
in order to sound like a writer. Well, there's my background is in newspapers, and we wrote at a fifth grade level. It's like, don't go for the big words, go for the small ones. The goal is to communicate what happened, and you don't want to jar people with a huge $50 word. Just use the $10 words, and you can still get the story across.
yep. I, I agree. What can I say?
Yeah, I right.
I think it's in the elements of style, which is kind of like the one of
Mm-hmm.
the really classics of on how to
I've got
write
a
in
copy on
English.
the shelf. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the rules is like omit needless words,
Yes,
and I'm
that's
like,
yeah. That is
that's
a
it.
good way. Yeah, that's a good way of. I guess you could say the way I described it was too many words, and I should have edited myself. No.
Well, it's what was it again? I think it might have been on in Stephen King's book on writing, which I think is every author should read. It's a lot of fun to
Sure.
read, and a lot of sad parts as well, but not just for the autobiographical stuff, but also just his views on writing. I don't know
Right.
how accurate they are. I haven't read that much of him, but where he talks about something and I forget, and somebody says something, or he says like, leave out the boring parts.
Yeah, that was Elmore Leonard. Leave out the parts
Oh,
that
okay.
people skip. Yeah.
Yeah. Leonard, one of my all-time favorites as
Oh
well,
yeah.
is like just, I mean, dialogue. God.
Mm-hmm. That's
Um,
yeah. I learned how to write dialogue through with his books. Yeah. Him
yeah,
and Chandler and Hammett.
it's I started reading Leonard after I started watching Justified, the Rhiannon
Mm-hmm.
Givens TV show, because I
Right.
had heard of Leonard but never really read anything, and I read a bunch of his books. I mean, this is years ago now, but and like just his dialogue is just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, good dialogue is in many ways even more fun than action scenes.
Right.
If it's well done, it's just a pleasure. But again,
Mm-hmm.
talking about realism, nobody talks like that.
Right. But you want it to sound like they would talk like that.
Yes, yes. um, Another question, because I think we're closing in on the hour. How have you evolved as a writer over the years?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, when I started out, I just wanted to do it for the money. I enjoyed writing, and I thought, well, this would be a good job. But I was mostly only interested in getting paid. Um, and then as I got older and got a little bit better, I developed my own voice, if you will, and then discovered that I had things to actually communicate. Um, you say that terminal memory was a fun book and didn't have any big messages in it. There actually is an overall theme to the book that readers may not get, and I don't care if they do or not. It is important to me to have so that I have a sort of a spine to hold the book together. Um, but if the reader misses it, that's fine. If they follow along, that's great too. But yeah, and in that theme is what I'm trying to say with that book. And that really surprised me when I started noticing I was going in that direction. That was, I guess, my early 30s when I started noticing that happening. And it's like suddenly it became more about the art than it did the money. And now I'm in a position where I get to enjoy both. Um, so that's one way. And I don't know. If I think about it, I'll come up with another way. But that is the main way that
Yeah,
I evolved. And then it's just realizing that if you need to, if you're going to write stuff, you need to be around people. You need to be out experiencing things, and you can't just sit in a room and type stuff.
yeah,
Or I mean, you could, but I mean, it's not going to be that good. But as you grow as a writer, you need to go out and explore more and all that. There's a place in the back of your head where all the shit goes, and then you never know what you're going to use. It's something you heard somebody say or witnessed, and then it ends up in a book. So
yeah.
that's I've learned to, because there was a time where I didn't, I used to be pretty shy. I didn't want to go around talking to people, and now I've got to get out and see folks and see life, and it all helps.
Yeah, and when I talk about like the message, I mostly mean like all of the postmodern stuff that we have nowadays about people want to change society and the world and blah blah
Yeah,
blah. And because you one of your characters, I think it was Sam himself, but I'm not sure anymore, talks about the troubles in Ireland, and there's a little bit about that, but it presents both sides
right.
fairly, in my opinion, and it's just like a touch
Right.
upon
Yeah, it
upon
was
that
just it
issue.
was just to give background to the
Yeah,
to the scene and why they were there. Well, like I said, I'm part Irish, so I understand the fighting from their perspective. My best friend is British, so I understand their perspective too. And it's a tough place to be there. Um, but yeah, but I mean, as far as the message of that particular book was, the theme was survival and overcoming personal obstacles and
yeah.
finding some sort of peace with them. But it was never overtly stated that way.
No, but it's clear. I mean, with Mara, with everything that she goes through, and then
Mm-hmm.
where she ends up. I don't want to spoil the book, and
Right.
especially the ending, but the clear evolution of her as a character and overcoming the past and so on is obviously important for the book and the overall message that it that you're sending out with it. But you're not hitting people over the head with it,
Right. You
which
you
is
you
what I
can't.
mean with when people talk about the messages. Like it's just so in your face, and I'm like,
Right.
please, please, show, don't tell.
Yeah. There is. Have you read Jack Carr,
No.
The Terminal List? Okay. Read The Terminal List.
Okay.
It's along the same lines of what I write. It's a good book.
I've seen
Uh,
the TV show, but I haven't read the
yeah.
book.
Well, you read the book, and the only reason I say read the book is because not only will you understand how Mr. Carr votes and how he doesn't vote, you will, by the end of the book, ask him to turn down the bullhorn, uh, because it's a little heavy, and it's like, great, I agree with you, but this is a message even I'm getting tired of. It's like, just tone it down a little bit. So no, I understand.
Yeah.
And when it's a message I don't agree with, obviously my reaction is a bit more extreme. But yeah, some authors get a little heavy-handed, and okay, that was their choice. but I prefer to
I,
keep it subtle.
I think Jim Butcher, who writes urban fantasy, The Dresden Files,
Mhm.
really best, great author, and I enjoy his series tremendously as well. Trying to get him on the podcast. I think he's busy. He said something along the lines of never preach harder than you can tell a good story.
Oh yeah.
And I think that is a really good way of putting it. It's like, sure, put all your pet peeves in there, put whatever you want
Hmm.
to, have in there as a message, or the best intentions that you have for society and mankind. It's all fine, but it first and foremost needs to be a good story.
It's got to serve the story first. Yeah, the
Yeah.
story's the thing.
All right, and on that positive note, I think we're pretty much getting to the end of the first part of this talk that we're having. Because we are going to switch over to Patreon, where I have
Okay.
a bunch of fun questions for Brian from one of our patrons,
Okay. Very
and
good.
and I've got this. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. Tomintul, Speyside Glenlivet, 14 years old, that I'm going to have a little glass of. I know it's early for you, but I am well in the safe zone as far as acceptable drinking times.
Okay.
So, folks, head on over to the Patreon for the second part. I will put links to everything we discussed, where you can get Ryan's books, his website, and so on in the show notes for this episode. Two quick questions before we go on. So, first, what is next for you? If you are in a position to talk about it.
Well, what's next is I'm working on Sam Raven #8, and I just turned in #7, and then we're going to sign in the next couple of weeks for books 9 and 10. So there will be at least 10 Ravens. By the time I turn in book 10, we will evaluate where the series is going and how sales are, and that will determine if we continue. My publisher wants me to continue. They would love to have 20 books in the series.
Nice.
And I'm like, okay, let's, instead of making that commitment right now, let's do a little bit at a time and see where we're going, because people might get bored with them. I might get bored with them. And then I've got
I have a perfect solution for that. Please, everybody listening, I mean, just buy the Sam Raven books. That's it. Make the decision for Brian.
And then I have some stuff on the side that I'm working on that may or may not be published. We joke about it around the house and call it the books I'm not getting paid for. But but yeah, there's stuff I'm doing on the side that may see the light of day someday, but more Ravens on the way for sure.
All right, excellent. Where can people reach you?
My website is briandrakebooks.com, and I should post updates there more than I do, but I've got a few updates there that you can read that are just silly things. And I'm on Twitter. I think my Twitter handle is Dr. Brian 1975.
Okay,
I'm not a
I'll look all
doctor,
that up.
but I will get the actual handle to you so you can put it on your own website. And on Twitter we get pretty raw, so it's if you're sensitive. And then some people find me on Facebook, but I don't know how they do it. I guess they search for me. You can do that too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
the website has a direct contact link to get in touch with
Okay.
me, and
All right.
everyone's welcome to.
Excellent. Okay, folks, we're heading over to the Patreon. Brian, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it as well.
I'm happy, and I hope the listeners had fun too. B go buy all Brian's books, because there's a bunch of them and you're going to enjoy them. And we are going to talk some more in a minute. Bye, folks.